Hi everybody, you're listening to the Khandaan podcast by the You Podcast team, a bi-weekly podcast revisiting the movies of Amir Khan, Salman Khan and Shahrukh Khan.
Every show we pick a random year from 3 decades of collectively 300 films the Khans have done and let our listeners vote which movie we should talk about. So it's entirely up to you.
Pick a team, make a vote, take us down nostalgia lane, punish us, or make us reassess a movie we dismissed.
We love the Khans, most of us, sometimes. And we would love for you all to be part of our Khandaan, because when it comes to the Khans in Bollywood, nothing else really matters.
We're back on Khandaan episode 90. We are joined by Shah Shahid. Hi Shah.
Hey guys.
Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, no problem.
So you picked this week's movie after, us internally debating for a long time to have you on. And the decision you made was actually, I gotta say, I was really happy to see that somebody said that there's a lot of choice, because a lot of times people say, oh, you've done all the good movies. So it just kind of shows that there's still juice left in Khandaan as a concept, gives me hope.
I mean, or it just could be my definition of good between all your other guests varies, which might affect the outcome of the show ultimately.
True, which actually might show in the movie you picked, which is Yes Boss. And why did you pick this movie?
Honestly, process of elimination. I have trouble ordering off of a menu in a restaurant because there's too many choices. So when you send me an Excel sheet of I don't know how many Khan movies, I think I even told you, I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. Can you pick one? And you're like, no, that's not how this works. So yeah, I whittled it down. So I did process of elimination. I took a very sort of chemical lab approach to this. I'm like, all Amir Khan movies are out because Amrita. And then then I realized... and I went through all the rest of the list, and I'm like, there's really not... It's hard for me to talk about Salman Khan movies, and sort of... It's even good Salman Khan movies, and be like, look how awesome he was, knowing the kind of person he is. So I kind of steered clear of those a little bit. And so we got left with, young Shahrukh Khan. I always sort of... I wanted my kids to revisit old Shahrukh Khan movies because they like him now. So I'm like, look when he had a mullet and was, like, not as charming as now. But, yeah, I settled on this. I thought this was... I have fond memories of it. It's also a remake, so very on brand with my podcast. So I'm like, yeah, let's see if this holds up.
Yeah, what is the remake of?
For Love or For Money, a Michael J. Fox movie from '93.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that, but it definitely felt like a remake. Like, I was watching it and I was like, this seems like... I almost thought this was a remake of some Hong Kong movie or something like that.
I actually thought for a long time that it was sort of inspired by The Apartment.
Right. Yeah. And I know that, like, a few times I've read in articles of Shahrukh that he loves Michael J. Fox. He loves the kind of career he had.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a good connection there.
And you could see how a young Shahrukh Khan did have very much vibes of a young Michael J. Fox when, in the same sort of like, the disarming sort of lover boy type who was always very self-deprecating, never the alpha male in his roles, right? Like not that traditional hero, right? So, yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So did you end up watching it with your family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all watched it together. I was mentioning earlier that we did watch this on YouTube on like the B4U Movies channel, and so my kids got really irritated with the ads. Because, again, they've grown up in a streaming world where there's no commercial breaks. So they got really annoyed. And so I had to kind of very much school them and be like, listen, we watched movies like this back in the day, and we couldn't skip it after 5 seconds. So, that's how hard our lives were.
This is where I flex my YouTube Premium subscription, because I haven't seen a Grammarly or a Skillshare ad in a very, very long time.
Honestly, dude, like, I've never gotten as close to get a YouTube premium subscription as watching Yes Boss on B4U channel. Like, this was the first time I was like, I think I'm gonna get it, or I'm gonna, get a Grammarly subscription, one or the other. I don't know what's gonna happen.
But yeah, speaking of inspirations, I saw a brief 5-minute making of video on the Lehere channel for Yes Boss, and according to Shahrukh, the whole idea of Yes Boss came from the song that I tweeted on Twitter today. It's from a Rajesh Khanna movie from 1977 called Chawla Babu, and the song goes Yaar Dildara tujhe kaisa chahiye, pyar chahiye ya paisa chahiye.
Interesting.
That definitely sounds like
all those theories. Yeah.
So, Amrita, how did you have fond memories of Yes Boss?
Yeah. Especially the songs, the songs were everywhere the year that it came out. And I still, it's one of those albums that I don't know if it's actually any good. If somebody asked me, would you recommend this to people? I wouldn't know what to say because it's so hardwired into me, nostalgia-wise, that I have no idea. I still react to those songs in a particular way because that's so ingrained in my identity almost. So I don't know, are those good songs? I have no idea. I know they're not bad songs because we've listened to quite a few bad albums on here on Khandaan. But are they good? I don't know.
Yes.
It's very like Jatin Lalit, that kind of era of, and so much Abhijit in it, so much soulful bigotry, it's crazy.
But his voice is so perfect for Shahrukh though. Literally, I like the song. There are times when Shahrukh is lip syncing, and I'm just is he actually singing? Because it just sounds like him.
Yeah,
but Shahrukh is that level, he can play back the soul out of every song. Ek Din Aap, which is sung by Kumar Sanu, he does that well. He's lip synced with Udit on Dil To Pagal Hai and Devdas, and he does it as much as good as he does with Abhijit in this. Yeah.
So, Yes Boss came out in 1997. It's directed by Aziz Mirza, who we've actually talked about when we were doing Phir Bhi Dil Hai Hindustani. And it's 97 was a big year for Shahrukh because Dil To Pagal Hai, Koila, Pardes and Yes Boss dropped in the same year. And I think Yes Boss, probably because it's not as big of a hit as Pardes and Dil To Pagal Hai, and not as big of a flop as Koila, it kind of snuck underneath, And Aziz Mirza, he really has those movies about, small stories, about small dreams. And whenever we revisit his movies, I'm always excited about seeing the SRK-Juhi combo more than any other combo. I'm really excited for it. But I also have to say, the reality is that the movie usually doesn't hold up as much as it did in my brain.
It just feels like the movie directed itself. Because it's just a set piece after set piece, and you join the two. It's very episodic in that way because Aziz Mirza comes from that TV background. It just feels like, it's just gonna take its own sweet ass time, 2 hours and 40 minutes or something, and there's nothing to talk about,
Yeah. So, Shah, man, what did you think of Yes Boss revisiting?
Honestly, I think my biggest takeaway, because anytime we revisit these sort of 90s movies, there's always a sort of cringe factor. Especially again, because I'm revisiting these through the lens of my kids who are watching this for the first time, which I always maintain. Best part about having kids, you get to rewatch your favorites for the first time through their eyes. And this wasn't really as terrible as a lot of the other ones we've revisited. Actually, it's not even as, you take a 2020 movie in Coolie Number 1, and this wasn't as offensive. The comedy wasn't, as much at the expense of other people as it was just silly, stupid situations. So that was sort of my biggest takeaway, that, hey, this wasn't I wasn't angry or upset, or, things weren't too dated. Obviously things are dated, but it's not as terrible as a lot of other sort of movies of that era that we've gone back and watched. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But
I did have to explain infidelity to my 8-year-old daughter, which was a kind of a weird conversation.
Fair enough.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. No, probably not the best. Yeah. My kids watch a lot of like shows and stuff, so they're sort of very aware. Like I think like the first time we get to see, like I always have to sort of touch base with my 8-year-old to understand that she's following. Sometimes she doesn't, just lack of attention or whatever. And so I think I touched base with her when we saw that the Aditya Panscholi scene when he's introduced and with the girl in the beginning, and then he's putting the bracelet in the drawer and everything else. Like there's a lot of more fish in this. See, I sort of paused. I looked at my kid. I'm like, "Do you get what's happening?" And she's like, "Yeah, he's a cheater." I'm like, cool, let's continue.
Yeah, my daughter did not understand that because she lives in a Bambi world where everything is, roses and perfect. So I had to kind of explain to her. Yeah. But it's always funny explaining something to kids because you can, like, any difficult concept, they'll listen and then they'll just say, okay. And then they just move on. Yeah. And it's like, that's it. I was dreading this, but yeah, it's fine. Okay, yeah.
My kid got also very judgy too, though, like when she said that. She wasn't like, it wasn't casual. She was like, yeah, he's a cheater. And it's like, yes. Excellent.
Rahul is a cheater.
Siddharth is a cheater here.
I also like the fact that every time they have like one of these scenes, they just put on the full-on porn music, like it's all like old school porno, and I'm just like okay.
Saxophones.
I mean, it just from the start titles itself, it just takes us back to that era, right? The movie begins with Bharat Shah presents a Ratan Jain film with Venus coming in, and the first member to be introduced in the title credits is Aditya Panscholi. He is given first billing over Shahrukh Khan. So
was
you
he
can
that
just,
big of a star at the time? Is that why? Or?
He was never a big of a star.
So
sure.
Just alphabetically, is that?
No, he was a contender, man. He got close. Like he got closer to stardom than like Deepak Tijori or whatever, right? Like there was a moment where he was starring in movies with Madhuri Dixit, and there was a moment he could have done something if he wasn't such a poisonous, horrible being, So I don't, and even like in this role, I do think he has to play like a bit of comedy, like a bit of slapstick and a bit of villainy, but he also needs to be a guy that Juhi Chawla might fall in love with. So it is like Gulshan Grover could not do this, right? Like it had to be somebody like Aditya Panscholi. So there's something there,
I mean, if you say so.
Yeah. Sorry, but I didn't want to cut you off, Sujoy.
No, yeah, I just had that thought, like Aditya Panscholi gets first billing. We used to live in that world,
No, I noticed that too, like he got the first billing, and I remember like thinking, oh yeah, like this was in 1997, that's why.
This was post-Dar though, right?
Yeah, but it was this weird time because like, this was, you have to remember, like, Yes Boss was also the time when Shahrukh was hitting the big leagues and he was getting all these threatening phone calls from the underworld. And Aditya Panscholi was basically a made man, like he was in bed with all these gangsters and stuff. Because, and when all that stuff came out, when like all this stories of the underworld calling up different Bollywood stars and threatening them, and Rakesh Roshan got shot at, and all that stuff happened, it came out, and like Aditya Panscholi was talking about like how he admired Shahrukh so much because Shahrukh just wouldn't give in. And like anytime one of these bhais would call from Dubai or whatever, Shahrukh would just play them off. And he couldn't understand how Shahrukh was doing it because he himself was like deep in bed with these guys. Aditya Panscholi, like, I mean, quite separate from the fact that he is, a horrible human being, he was also in bed with all these gangsters. So I think like he had a certain amount of clout, even with a filmmaker like Aziz Mirza, because, all of these guys had to somehow survive in this industry.
Yeah.
Amrita, can you like also just maybe say why Aditya Panscholi is a bad guy? Because we're just like everybody's assuming it, but maybe not everybody knows why we're telling everybody that he's a bad kid.
Just
Right?
look at his face. No, I don't know. I'm kidding. I don't know. I have no
Google
context
it.
either.
I mean, that does work because you can see, like, he's been, like, getting into the drink and God knows what else. But no, he's just a bad dude. He's a cheater. He's a predator. There have been all these stories about how he preys upon young women in the industry. And the most famous of them is, of course, Khandaan Ranawat, whom he, how do we put it? Like, he
groomed her. He groomed her.
basically, because she was like about 17 or something when they started hooking up, and he was he was a sugar daddy. He introduced her to the business, and then he abused her, and every time she would try to leave, he'd beat her up and shit. And this is the whole time that he's still married, and he, his wife is, she just wouldn't give up on him. And Zarina Wahab, like, that's who he's married to. And she, she's been in this abusive marriage as well. And she just, she's one of those women that just will not give up on her husband and will just believe her husband. And then, of course, they have a son, and they raise the son to be basically in his dad's image. I mean, with a father like that, like, what hope does that kid have anyway, And this is the kid that went on to have a relationship with Jia Khan, who ultimately died. And, the official story is that she committed suicide, or she died by suicide. I apologize. But her mother has always held firm to the idea that Aditya Panscholi, like Suraj Panscholi, basically hounded her to death and contributed to her death, and it wasn't like a suicide, but she was basically driven to it. And there's a BBC documentary out right now about it, Death in Bollywood, I think is what it's called. And Aditya Panscholi has been friends with pretty much all the gangsters, all the abusers that hang around or are involved in Bollywood. And he's just a bad man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to kind of, and I think people can Google a little bit more about it. I'm actually going to be watching Death in Bollywood for our next episode, so I can give a bit more thoughts about that. But I just wanted to let people know, because otherwise sometimes we'll just assume everybody knows, but not everybody knows. So I just wanted to kind of, take a moment for that. Otherwise, people, you can Google it, and I'm sure you'll easily find the background on Aditya Panscholi. Let's move back to Yes Boss. I mean, it does bring you back to that era, especially from that first song, because it really reminded me of Hum Aapke Hain Kaun.
Yeah.
That era where they're really talking to the camera, and there's this soft melodic song going on and stuff like that. It really kind of hits you with the nostalgia stick really, really hard. But it's something special about Shahrukh and Juhi. The more we're kind of going through all of these movies, I really appreciate these two together. They really have a mutual respect. We've spoken about this in, Phir Bhi Dil Hai Hindustani. We've spoken about it in Duplicate too. And they're just like kindred souls. It's a really cool combo of these two. What do you think, Sujoy?
I mean, there are only very, very few actresses who shared the screen with that sort of fire between the two. The sparks fly, and at the same time they can make fun of each other, and all of that falls in place up to the T, and Shahrukh and Juhi are just a firecracking jodi on screen. I don't think even Shahrukh and Kajol, they have that very violent, intense love chemistry between the two on screen. And I think with Shahrukh and Juhi, it's the very pyar dosti hai kind of a vibe that goes on.
Yeah.
And
while you're talking to me, I had a flashback of at least 7 shots of Shahrukh pulling Kajol's hair or slapping her, and I don't remember any time he's done that with Juhi. Like never. Like he's never slapped her. He's never pulled her hair.
There are some scenes in Yes Boss where Shahrukh just goes a bit mental and Juhi confronts him straight away, like you're hurting me or whatever, in this movie. But there are more scenes where Juhi is laughing at Shahrukh in this movie, and those are to die for. I love comedy face Juhi, always. She's amazing.
The thing that struck me while I was watching this film is that we don't do the comedy songs anymore, and these two do the comedy songs so well. Like they have such a talent for it. Like even when the comedy isn't that funny, the two of them make it funny. Bollywood doesn't do the comedy song anymore, and I think it's because they just don't have actors of that caliber. And even with Juhi's peers, I remember, there's a lot of things that Juhi does on screen that I feel like Preeti has tried to do on screen. And, sometimes I see, Deepika try to do, but they don't have that comedic sense of timing that Juhi does. And also, like we said, we've talked about this over and over again on this podcast, the relationship that Shahrukh and Juhi have, they just basically, they're not even acting. They're just being themselves with each other on screen. And it is so charming. And I have to say though, like you guys were saying, it's pyar dosti hai stuff. And that is the vibe, but then when they turn it on and they're being all sexy and stuff with each other, I buy that too. They're just really steamy on screen as well. It's great.
With Juhi, I also find, I was mentioning with Shahrukh, again, I might be repeating myself because you guys have definitely revisited a lot more Shahrukh movies than I have at this point, but I'm just watching him on screen, and so much of his performance is his physical energy. I was having a conversation with someone else about Akshay Kumar and how he does all his own stunts, and I'm like, well, so does Shahrukh, and they were like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, he's not roundhouse kicking someone in the air through a 9-story building, but there's so much physicality in just his everyday performances. And you look at these 90s movies, he's somersaulting on the ground, he's flipping over things just randomly. I'm getting exhausted watching him, and I'm like, where does he get the energy? Because this was multiple takes, and it's just and knowing his story, again, if you're uninitiated, you might be like, well, clearly he's on crack. And it's no, this is him. This is how he has always been. And I find Juhi matches that energy level on screen, especially, again, those comedy songs. He's being a total buffoon, and so is she kind of reacting to him, which to me was super sweet. She's never been, like I said, Shahrukh's never been alpha male, star, the hot guy star for me in the 90s. He definitely had that later on in his career. But to me, Juhi's been sort of similar. She's never been the quote unquote hot girl. She's gorgeous and she definitely does those scenes really well. But she's always been this bubbly, sort of sweet personality. And when they get together, you kind of see that, okay, these aren't I wouldn't think they'd be main leads, quote unquote, but they make it work in such a sort of nice, sweet, wholesome way. And yeah, I was really impressed by that. I did scream when Ek Din Up came on when the movie started, because these 90s Khan movie songs all blend together for me. I don't know which song is from what movie. So going into this, I didn't know which songs to expect. So anytime one of the songs came on and I recognized it, I freaked out. And my kids looked at me like, what? So that was fun.
I think we've sort of talked about Shahrukh giving that extra stunts and thrills whenever he gets to do that in other movies like Duplicate and Koila. And he does that here as well, because it's not required in that climax scene, but he gives that extra flip. Even if he's just supposed to do just one.
I have a note. It's just way too many unnecessary backflips.
He loves blood so much that Juhi backslaps her once, and she's got blood coming out of his lips.
Yeah. Someone. My kid was like, "How?" I'm like, "I don't know, ring."
No, there's a point where they're on the beach and it's a comedy song, and she crouches down, and then he does a somersault over her and lands flat on his back. And I immediately thought about Asim, and like Asim saying how how Shahrukh has basically fucked up his entire skeleton by like doing all these things. And I was like, yep, that had to hurt. And then at the end of the song, he like writes in his little diary like sang a song with the girl 1,000 rupees, and I was like, dude, you're just like underselling yourself so hard. Like that was so much effort. You definitely deserve more money.
Those are 90s
Definitely
inflation numbers, right?
Yeah.
Hazard pay, insurance, like those long-term health benefits that you're missing out on.
But like when you say about मैं कोई ऐसा गीत गाऊं, when it comes to for comedy songs, my favorite scene in that is the trumpet section, right? When first Shahrukh picks up that small one and Juhi's laughing her ass off, and then he picks up that huge bassoon. And then
It is the most beautiful smiles ever, I feel. That reaction that Juhi gives, that is like GIF worthy. I don't even understand why you've not made that a GIF yet, Sujoy.
I'll do it. I'll do it after the show.
Best,
And then contrast that to Chudi Baji Hai, right? And that's the typical Yash Raj Switzerland song that Juhi and Shahrukh are doing. And they are, again, like Amrita said, they can definitely turn the steam on, and they did that.
I feel like a lot of the scene, like, you know, their comedy scenes and their comedy songs and everything, it's just Shahrukh doing all these weird things just to get her to laugh. And then when she does it, like, you know, like that's the scene. It's so cute, yeah.
And I think it's that vibe that he made, because I've said this before, I don't think Shahrukh is necessarily funny. Like,
no.
But Juhi finds him really, really funny. Like, he would not get away with Kajol or Rani with this crap.
Yeah.
They would not take it, right? Juhi thinks he's hilarious, and that creates kind of a different vibe. But watching Yes Boss, I also thought, because I always kind of go back to Shah Rukh's other main heroines, right? And Juhi for me is one of them. Juhi, unfortunately, didn't have the movies to kind of like transition into that career that maybe Kajol could or even Rani could, because I do feel the movies are just not there, and I think that's kind of unfortunate, and I also feel that with Yes Boss, because the character, and maybe also just the timing we're in that transitional phase of what is an Indian woman. And I think that was also the problem with Seema as a character in this movie, where everybody's saying that she's super ambitious, she's so ambitious, and the movie doesn't show any of her ambitious. The only plan she has is, you know, getting together with...
I mean, marrying rich is
marriage, but I don't think Seema wants to marry rich necessarily. She kind of gets wooed by this rich guy, and she genuinely likes him. But it's not because he's rich, or at least I don't see that in the movie, that it's really the wealth that has attracted her. She just gotten wooed by him, right? Like, that's how I got it, at least. And then everybody's like, she's so ambitious. Kashmira Shah is like, she's ambitious, she's a model, and you know, but at the moment she can get married, she can, you know, put the sari on and do the karwa chauth, she's in it. She won't have sex before marriage, you know, all of these. She won't wear a bikini, that's a big thing too. And I think that's just kind of like, you know, like Disha Patni, her whole career is in a bikini, right? Like, you know, like the transition happened very subtly, and I think Juhi's career was just on the other side of that transition.
You know, the funny thing about Juhi not wearing a bikini in this film is that she's Miss India. Like, she had to wear a bikini to like win, not just Miss India, but like when she went for like Miss Universe or Miss World or whatever it was. But I do like that this film doesn't slut shame her. You know, it's like all the men in this movie are constantly trying to slut shame her. And then at the end, the mom comes in and she's just like, fuck that nonsense. Like, you know, like, she's just, you know, she's just trying to do what my son is trying to do. And they're both trying to get ahead. And that's fine by me. And I thought that was really nice.
I wrote the line down because I thought it was so hilarious. She says, "एक औरत और एक माँ के नाते से मैं तुम्हें स्वीकार करती हूँ." I thought that is only Reema Lagoo can deliver that line.
My stamp of approval.
My favorite line from this movie, though, was when Seema's about to leave the restaurant because she's had the Karwa Chauth, and Aditya Panscholi is really angry, and she was like, "I've been taking this vrat because of Maji ki Shraddha," and Aditya Panscholi says, "Bhaad mein jai Maji ki Shraddha."
Oh God. By the way, I had a few India questions for you guys, like, because you're here. I wrote these down. First of all, do people have food in a club? Like, okay, I understand you show up with a Shalwar Kameez and a Mangal Sutra in a club when, Dr. Alban is playing. But do people also have like full-on like chicken tandoori meals with roti and stuff like that in a club in the 90s? Is that a thing?
I mean, daru ke saath chakna chahiye, so...
Isn't it too dark and like how would you eat in that lighting? Like that to me was like, I would eat a pepper and be like, oh crap, turn off the strobe light.
No, it wouldn't be like I don't remember eating like Indian food at the club, although I feel like there probably was, but usually it would be things like burgers and like chicken wings and things like that.
In a club?
Yeah.
Full-on burgers in a club?
Yep,
wow,
yep,
okay.
That's weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
And people do actually show up in a Shalwar Kameez, I imagine, right? That probably happens.
Not the clubs that I went to, but I do remember like there were all these stories back in the day about like women getting turned away from the club because they showed up in a sari, and then it used to be like national conversation. Like we didn't have social media back then, so it probably didn't become as big of an issue as it could have been, like if it happened today. But it used to be a thing like, like why can't Indians wear Indian clothes and go to clubs in India? Like this is discrimination. Right. This is blah, blah, blah.
So was this like a national discourse on like Doordarshan TV or something? Or
I think it was like, I can't even remember where the outrage, like what did we do to outrage back when we didn't have social media?
That's what I'm asking. Like on what platform did these sort of conversations happen?
Did we write letters to the newspaper? Like, I don't even know. Like, I just remember, like, it used to be a thing.
Print
but you have to be so convinced enough to be to outrage, right? Because you have to keep that outrage going in until you pen those words into a letter and send it across. Go to the post office and post it.
It's a lot of work.
I'd love to hear from our listeners. If you've ever been to a club in a Shalwar Kameez or a sari, drop us a line. Send us pictures. I would love to see that. Second question. Do people actually sniff their cigarettes as much as Gulshan Grover does in this movie?
So about that, I mean, was that a cigarette? I assumed he was doing one of those like menthol stick things. Like he had congestion for, the 9 weeks of the movie. That's what I take it as.
It was another kind of cigarette, shall we say.
Well, I mean, everyone... I don't know what this says about my family, but as soon as they saw him sniffing, literally everyone, including my 12-year-old, just looked at me and was like, cocaine? Like, did the nose thing? Like, is that what he's... And I'm like, no, but I'm worried that you know what that is. Like...
and especially cocaine in a cigarette, because that's not the standard way. That's like a higher level than just like taking it. Right. Anyway, we're not gonna do another drugs talk here. It's a funny one. I thought that was weird. And then the third thing, and this is kind of bringing you back to Shahrukh as as a milestone in cinema. Was Karwa Chauth such a big thing before Shahrukh came on screen? Was like, I don't remember it like being such a big story plot point. Did Shahrukh introduce that or not?
It was
Shahrukh invented Karwa Chauth.
I was gonna,
Women only wanted to do Karwa Chauth since Shahrukh came along. Yeah. Maybe that's like how awesome he is.
And the difference between like the difference between Kajol doing Karwa Chauth and Juhi is, after the Karwa Chauth routine, she places the thali on Shahrukh's head.
Yeah.
No, I think Shahrukh worked with like I have no idea why Aziz Mirza was doing it, but like the Yashraj, Karan Johar little clique, they're very conservative, old school Punjabis. So I feel like that was just them like making, it's like this, like when people portray romance, or when they're writing about romance, or when they imagine what is romantic, every culture has its own idea of what that is. And I think for like, these guys, like, very conservative Punjabi dudes, they sort of fetishize this idea of a particular kind of Punjabi femininity, which does include Karwa Chauth and everything. The idea of this woman who loves you so much that she would sacrifice anything for you, especially because like most Punjabi women that I know are like, they're not the meek, coy kind of people that a lot of these stories talk about. Like, they're more like, they're like very like Dilp Hank, like very outgoing, very, they're not women that you want to mess with, basically. So I think because of that, there's like there's more of a pull towards an idea of women who are like much more meek and like would happily just, spend their whole day like waiting for the chand to come and be like, you are my chand, and like all that stuff. So I think that's what we are seeing on, and it's really funny to me that like the two men who like really spearheaded this whole Karwa Chauth thing was like Aditya Chopra and Karan Johar, and Karan Johar is gay, and Aditya Chopra like married a woman who by all accounts is exactly like that, like, a very sweet, wonderful woman, and then promptly divorced her to marry Rani, who's like the entire opposite. So I'm like, what is this?
Wow.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking of, like, I had heard of the concept of Karwa Chauth, but as a story plot point, I don't remember anybody else making it such a big deal since kind of Shah Rukh started it with DDLJ, I guess. So yeah, I was just like thinking about this, that it's really a Shah Rukh thing. But there were a few other Shah Rukh things that I had here. I had, I loved the. Like he, within a few minutes, he's like, "Meri maa kehti thi, rumal aur zamir saaf hona chahiye." Like a "Meri maa kehti hai" line is typical Shah Rukh. I had the strategic bleeding, which Shah Rukh does, which is also typical Shah Rukh. The way too many backflips is typical Shah Rukh. Also, one other thing that I also noticed, a Shah Rukh thing, is talking to a girl in the reflection of a mirror is a very Shah Rukh thing. You know what I mean? Like, a woman is looking at herself in a mirror, Shah Rukh will come next to her and then say or do something. It's a very Shah Rukh thing. I don't think anybody else does it except Shah Rukh.
There's also another Shah Rukh thing in this movie, which we have seen in others, is the typical Shah Rukh running in slow-mo, and it's shown as a taxi chase scene in this movie, which is totally unnecessary.
I have a question about that scene. Was that guy someone? Because what was that? What was the point of that scene? Like, it feels very much like, oh, that's like, it's like that's the director making a cameo or something. But like, that was such a pointless thing that I'm like, that's got to be someone, right?
The taxi driver is the cameo. That's an actor called Joginder Shelly. He is very popular Punjabi actor, and that was the cameo, not the other guy who was about to catch the taxi.
That scene really. I thought this is like a Hong Kong remake when I was watching that scene. That's where jumping through it. So yeah, I also really like their first date together, Seema and Rahul's first date, because they're really like bonding over small time dreams, and very quickly they kind of understand. It's based on a miscommunication, but Shah Rukh makes this decision that they're not compatible. And I just thought that was really cute. Like that first, like you're just having Nariyal and like talking about your dreams and things like that. And they just literally met and it's like their first date. Yeah. I thought that was really beautifully done.
Well, I like that was also the payoff in the climax, right? Because like I was getting ready for like a typical 90s climax where it's just like dishum dishum. But I forgot that climax is very much them hashing out their misunderstanding. under this sort of the setting of this fight scene, which I thought was really cute, because it's like, you're like, well, why didn't you tell me you love me? Why didn't you? I mean, and then it does get dishum when, obviously at the end when he gets, superpowers after she says, I love you. So I guess we did get that, but I like that was very much like a comedy scene and not just like a typical action hero scene.
And like Juhi says in that scene, तुमने इतना लंबा गाना गाया, तुम इतना नहीं कह सकते कि तुम मुझसे प्यार करते हो.
I also love that scene where I think Juhi is drunk and he's trying to, get her to sober up, and she's like blowing on his hair or something like that. It was just like super cute the way they were together. I really like that.
To clarify, she was roofied. Because Aditya Panscholi, and it was. I think that scene for me was when Amrita was saying like the steamy scenes. That scene to me was like because they did the way they lit that scene is also very like Juhi looks like super sexy, and then it was a very sort of intimate moment, and we were really up close. I thought that was a really cool scene. Taking away from they're cute but also sexy.
I
mean, like Aditya. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, on the climax, we forgot to point out the fact that Aditya Panscholi has a rape den.
Yeah.
Like that's where the final thing is going.
Anytime a guy's car pulls into his living room, get out.
Get out.
Run.
Get out.
Nothing good is gonna happen now. Just leave.
But everybody just kind of walks in.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, everybody walks in the rape den. Gulshan Grover comes in, Shahrukh comes in, at the end, Ma comes in. Like, this location is well known.
Okay, but can we quickly just talk about the fact that the ending of this movie is he basically gets away with it? Because, like, they just bounce. They're like, okay, cool, we're done. Let's go, Gulshan. And it's just like I was half expecting the character of Johnny, who brought the mom for some reason, because clearly the rape den is on Google Earth somewhere. But they also I was expecting the ending would be like, okay, the good guys that got their thing, and I so thought his wife was gonna come, right? Like Johnny was like, and I also brought Sheila, Bobby, and she was gonna come, and then you get the sense that okay, cool, he's screwed over, the wife knows, all is well that ends well, but no, he just gets away with it.
Yeah.
That was really upsetting.
It was. Yeah, because I really like Kashmira Shah, weirdly enough, in this movie. I had not thought of her in ages.
She got such a raw deal in this film, though. She's definitely there as the body. And, like in her first scene, like she's wearing this outfit that I don't even know what that outfit is.
I had a name for it. I call it Gauri Khan aesthetic. That's what I
Nice.
Oh, dear.
Oh, but the entire time, like every time she comes on screen, like there's this porno music in the background. And then she's wearing these progressively weirder and weirder outfits that I think are supposed to be sexy, but literally just look like bordello chic. And I'm just like, I don't understand what this is. And also like, she's like, I don't get it. Like, is he being genuine when he says that, she's being a bitch? Or like, is it just that he's just, because she seems to think that he's just provoking a fight and that's not really her. He's just forcing her to say these things. And she genuinely likes him, and it's implied that he's out having all these affairs, but he's not like sleeping with her. So I'm just like, what is happening in this marriage?
Yeah, it didn't make sense, right? Because again, like he's a dick, clearly, and from his perspective, like if you were going to be sort of like a creepy leech guy, like she's kind of got everything that from that perspective you want. She's rich, so you just gold digger, you just hit it big, but it's not. But in other tropes where it's like you have to fasaw a rich girl who's not conventionally attractive, and then that's why you go do bahar ki biryani kind of a thing. But that's not the case here, right? Like she's clearly smart, she's gorgeous, she's rich, like she's got everything that from a superficial perspective you would want. Yet you're still jeopardizing your gold digging wealth. By doing this shit outside. Like it didn't make sense to me why that was happening.
Yeah.
Well, the only reason is that Aditya Pancholi's Siddharth character is Havas ka pujari. That's what I wrote down in my notes.
Because there was also that scene where his father-in-law shows up at the office suddenly and it's supposed to do something, but again, there's no follow through. Nothing happens there. It's really,
let's
weird.
talk about the office as well. From Aditya Panscholi's perspective, it's an ad agency, so he has this beauty contest and chooses models to work with clients. And then B, Shahrukh also aspires to own an ad agency of his own, and he even polishes the small windows of the model. But then nobody talks about their passion, about what they really want to do with the ad agency. Nobody talks about business models or anything.
Sujoy, only because you said that it's an ad agency that they're running, that I understand that it's an ad agency. I did not understand which business they were in. I swear to God, I didn't understand it. Because he seems I don't see like this father-in-law being an ad man. Like, he just seemed like a rich guy.
And he owns the Andaza Apna Apna Wala house.
Yeah, the same houses everywhere, right? Like these are the, like, even Rape Den I've seen that Rape Den with Amrish Puri or something like that. Yeah, it's a weird one. I do feel that's something that was missing. At least give then, that Kashmira Shah then gives the ad agency to Shah Rukh. Right. That would have been like, but I think it's Aziz Mirza. All of his movies are kind of about, just be happy in your small timeness. Like, that's what it seems to be like. I think we do need to maybe revisit Raju Ban Gaya Gentleman. But I remember that was also kind of the moral of that story at the end.
I guess that's... Again, Raju Ban Gaya Gentleman is a remake of Shri 420, and it's kind of like it shares that whole small town common man sort of a story, I guess.
I think the way I read that was, I don't know if this is just a product of the era, but I think at the time it was very much like, being successful, generally was sort of a lot of the ambition for a lot of people. There wasn't any sort of specificity to it. Like, it's not that I want to do this in this industry because that's what I'm good at. I think it was more of like, you just have to make it big, however it is, wherever it is. And I think that's why it's vague, that for Shah Rukh, also because it kind of raises the questions too, that if you have an ad agency and you're working for an ad agency, why would that person help you set up your own ad agency? Because they're just basically creating competition for themselves. And also at the end, like, he had the model, so it was, and I think this is where you get the translation from the remake For Love or Money, because in For Love or Money, Michael J. Fox's character is working as a concierge of a hotel, and he wants to start his own hotel on his own. He wasn't getting the owner of the hotel to help him or anything. He was looking at investors. Like, the Aditya Panscholi character was like an outside investor who would help him set up his own hotel. Whereas here, it didn't make sense, especially in the end, where he doesn't get his own ad agency. He gets an office. So technically, he'd still be working for Aditya Panscholi, but just have his own department or something. So, and again, the way I can defend that is that I think it was just like being a boss and being a manager, or being, having employees under you and being successful and getting that salary, I think was the end goal of anyone in that time versus, I want to be creative and, tell stories or whatever.
Because it is like this big reveal that here's the keys to the office, and then he opens up the blinds and Juhi sees it and she's heartbroken. I was like, how is this a surprise? He's been talking about this ad agency from the start. Like, what are we even talking about? Like, there were a few of these key scenes that I didn't really understand why this was such a big betrayal.
I can defend that too. I think for him, going into it, it was always, okay, girl or office, right? Girl or my dreams, right? He knew that going in, but I don't think for her it contextualized that that's what was going on, that he's either got to pick the office or me, or I'm either going to get him or he's going to lose his dreams. I think that clicked in that moment for her. I think that's why it was sort of like this emotional scene from her perspective, of that it's clicking the choices that they're making and where they're going, especially because Aditya Panscholi also sort of points it out that, look, everyone's happy. You got your office and me and her got each other. And I think that's when it clicks for her that, oh, okay, so I don't get to be with him because he's choosing the office over, like, that was the sort of the equation, I think, maybe.
Yeah, I guess. I do find it also funny that the interval point in this movie is like marquee entry. That's like interval. And I also like that, Ma is like full on Sasuma 10 minutes after meeting her. She's like, puja kar le beti. It's like, you just met her. You just met her. It's insanity. But what were your favorite songs in the movie? Like, was there one, because you were mentioning that, you know, they kind of popped up and you reminded, oh, this is a good song. Like, I still know all of the lyrics to Bas Itna Sa Khwab Hai. I like, from the start till the end, I know all of the lyrics still. So that kind of like brought me back. But what was your like favorite song?
Well, Ek Din Up. I didn't know that was part of this movie. So when that was the opening, I'm literally sitting there like smiling and screaming. My wife joined me, and the kids are just like freaking out, like our parents are weird. And then Chand Tare is another song that I really liked, and then yeah, Main Koi Aisa Geet Gaun was another one. I thought was really cool. Those are those are the ones I remember the most. Jata Hai Tu Kahan was sort of like the funny climax song that always happens, right? Like where it's like everyone's doing something, and I mean that was fun. But I think those three songs are sort of the ones I remember the lyrics to. I'm singing along. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that song, it really reminded me of the one that they did in Phir Bhi Dil Hai Hindustani. What was that song that they did?
Ban Ke Tera Jogi.
Yeah, which was a much better song, I feel. Yeah, that really reminded me of it. Same picturization and stuff like that. Yeah, a lot of similarities between this movie and Phir Bhi Dil Hai Hindustani. They took a lot of the same formula, I think. Sujoy, what about you? What was kind of your favorite song?
Ek Din Aap Yu, Chand Tare is an all-time favorite for me. Because it kind of when I remember the first time I saw Chand Tare and Shahrukh mimicking playing the piano. I think he's the best on-screen Bollywood pianist ever. You know, we've seen piano songs all throughout our lives in Shami Kapoor movies and Shashi Kapoor movies and Vinod Mehra playing and all of that. And Shahrukh does it the best, and he did it in DDLJ and this, and he even plays piano in Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, but I think Chand Tare is the best one.
So Joy, I do have to mention Anil Kapoor and Meri Jung though.
Of course, yes.
just gotta.
Yeah. I also would like to especially mention Suniye To, because I used to have a friend who I don't speak to. I haven't spoken to in a lot of years, but he used to sing Suniye To a lot along with the background score. So he would, between the stanzas, he would sing ta-dam tam ta-dan, ta-dam ta-dan. So it kind of throws back to that era of when you used to play Antakshari and he's singing Suniye To, but he would sing both stanzas with the ta-dan tan ta-dan.
This has been now 2 episodes consecutively where you and Amrita have talked about somebody who sings a song weirdly. By the way, Suniye To, I tweeted this yesterday, but this is the only time in history where a Harish song is better than a Shahrukh song, because it's the same song as Sela Sela Tu Pyar Hai Pehla. It's exactly the same song, came out exactly the same year, and I've been waiting 20 years to tell somebody this. I mean, Sela is the better song.
Jatin Lalit copied it anyway from, I think it's a Tamil song. It's called, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's written as Azagia Lela from a movie called Ulathai Alitha.
Azagia Lela?
Yeah, that's the one.
So for me, like Suniye To is actually like, it was a, like so when I think of Yes Boss songs, like there are some songs that always come into my mind, right? Like this Chand Tare, there is Ek Din Aap Yu. Like these are songs that I still like, you know, I know all the words to. But like I'd forgotten just how madcap Suniye To is. Like watch. And like I'd completely forgotten the part where like he puts on the wig and everything and he's pretending to be a rocker and stuff.
He becomes Slash on the rock concert.
Yeah. And then like she's constantly trying to like peer under the wig, like, and then he just like flips it back and she gets completely pissed off. These are like little things that I'd forgotten about it, and then I saw it and it was such like the humor is obviously very 90s, right? Like it's not. Yeah. Like, it's pretty cringe. But it's cringe in a way that reminds me of my childhood. And so I was like, I'm having the best time. I don't care.
It's also not cringe in like a terrible or harmful way. I think we use cringe very broadly. This sort of cringe was this is just like, oh, this is outdated. Oh, look at the suits. That kind of a cringe level.
Exactly.
It's not too offensive or like bordering out, well, this is a terrible depiction of this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, like, Chand Tare sort of was like a throwback to that era of Farah Khan choreography with slow motion lip sync that she does. Like, she sort of invented it in Bollywood with Pehla Nasha, and that sort of carries forward with some sequences of Chand Tare, but also the scenes where the transition happens very beautifully, like when he says "Barasne lage heere moti" and he throws up the popcorn, and what falls down is all the pearls on the floor. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And also just Shahrukh is basically entertaining us with nothing.
Yeah.
He has nothing. He has a piano, he's dancing, and he's a star. And like he didn't need like 7,000 background dancers or anything like that. He could just hold it on its own. It's such a it really still holds up, and I hate that I enjoy bigot Abhijit songs and voice so much in those. It's kind of a painful one. Random thoughts. Any random thoughts that you still have that we have not covered? I have a few here that I wrote down.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Johnny Lever in their outdoor shoot when he just randomly approaches the white actress.
White girl?
Yeah, she says, "Hi, where are you from?" Yeah, where are you from?
Read me. I am Reed Ki Haddi.
Why are you spoiling your life in Poland? Come to my island, Mud Island, India. Pardon? What pardon? I'll take you to the garden.
That's so funny.
I'm definitely sure that was not part of the script. Like, Johnny Lever just took took down a shot of whiskey and just like popped up on this set.
Who would write that, man? Who would write "Main hu Reed ki Haddi" like that?
What are you doing?
Happens,
Reading?
In terms of the mic, it happens very much in the background. It's not like in the foreground of the scene. So I'm pretty sure, that does sound like it was very much an ad lib.
I also really like the part where they're watching an indecent proposal, and it's Robert Redford and Demi Moore, and they're just making up all these nonsense like dialogues for each other. Then Shahrukh starts making like kissy noises, and Juhi's like creeped out, and he's like, "What? Like, wait, you have to do it." And Aditya Panscholi's like freaking out, and then also there's like I love that scene of like Aditya Panscholi just like bursting into the room to like stop them from having sex. And then the two of them are just like hanging out, and she's got rollers in her hair, and he's like, he's just sitting there in his banyan or whatever. And the funny thing is, like, it is so much more intimate, like them being on the bed like that, like having like no filter with each other, making up all that kind of stuff. It hints at like a greater intimacy than them just like having sex, and Aditya Panscholi just can't see it, and he just like, you're just being like good buddies, and then he just leaves.
I think I like also just the scene where Kashmira Shah just barges into their hotel room, and she sees that they're both like under the blankets, and she doesn't run away, she barges in even more. I just thought that was hilarious, because clearly Kashmira Shah's person has never seen a poor person in her life. She's like, honeymoon pe kahan gaye the? It's like, where? What? They didn't go anywhere. Like, it's crazy.
But then in that same scene, like, Shahrukh, Juhi jumps out of bed and like rips off the covers, and then Shahrukh is wearing this pink nightie. Like, that was really funny. And that,
he's not embarrassed about it at all, which was like the kicker.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also like that Rahul is really smug about his terrible, terrible poetry that he writes on like card,
Yeah.
कि कहीं दिल पे शायर छुपा है. I was like, what? Really? This is the shairi you got? Like, he's so happy with it. I also like that Rahul is just siphoning off bundles of cash. Like, this movie does not have credit cards, it only has bundles of cash, like, everywhere. Yeah. And he's just siphoning off as much cash as he can from Aditya Panscholi, which is now a strategy that's been adopted by Indian production houses towards Amazon and Netflix. So they've taken their cue from Shahrukh and Yes Boss. I also like that Hapus Ham wala scene.
Yes.
That was such a throwaway line, but Shahrukh is so hilarious.
But the comedy talent in this movie, right? It has all familiar faces from Aziz Mirza shows, but Rakesh Bedi in that Nepali Bahadur accent and Ashok Saraf, right? They were criminally underused. I think they could have been much funnier because they have done much funnier stuff. But yeah, especially Ashok Saraf. I don't remember anything that he did in this movie other than turning up with the Ma in the climax.
Yeah, he was basically a surrogate for Indian society. Like, tu hai kaun? Tu joker hai? Tu dalal hai? Tu kya kar raha hai? That's like Desi Auntie Network. I did like that how much the Nepali watchman was invested in the whole Rahul situation. And I genuinely, it's such an easy joke, but messing up message with massage is hilarious. Tu massage dega, main ladkiyon ko massage dega.
It wasn't like it ended; it just kept on going even after the joke was over, which I love.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. So, Shaman, would you recommend people revisit Yes Boss? Does it still hold up for you?
I mean, yeah, like if you want to sort of get a sense of early Shahrukh and sort of get glimpses of what made him so likable, so charming, and sort of how he built his career. I definitely think there's a lot to take away from this. Some of sort of my random thoughts that I sort of want to really quickly mention is that, like I said, the movie holds up from that perspective of, like, nowadays you revisit the old movies and, woke culture, you kind of, DDLJ, this happens a lot with. Everyone has a hot take. With Yes Boss, I feel like even if you try to nitpick a lot of the things, not barring the premise of, adulterous boss and enabling, assistant, secretary, subordinate guy, you kind of take a look at it like, sure, that's problematic, but nowhere in the story, like, for example, we don't ever question Juhi Chawla's character. Like, she's never portrayed as either, like she's making bad choices, sure, but when she finds out, she doesn't go back willingly into that scenario, right? Like, she clearly loves this guy. Every lie she has to tell, she's broken down by it. But again, it's the convincing of Aditya Panscholi, convincing of Shahrukh Khan, that sort of has to force her back into this scenario. So you never kind of go like. Usually with these movies, there's always the stance of this stupid girl. You know what I mean? Like it's always the victim that gets blamed because she's putting herself willingly into these situations over and over again, holding out hope. But there's so many times in this movie that Juhi Chawla backs out, right? Like, Seema wants to leave, but it's, and then throughout that journey, she falls in love with, Rahul's character, Shah Rukh Khan's character. So, like, I can't, the typical complaints in a story like this, I don't really have, which is why I keep saying I think it holds up really well. Thing about Shah Rukh Khan's comedy too, for me, like a big moment of like where I sort of LOL'd, and it was such a subtle blink and you miss thing, which I think is a huge aspect of Shah Rukh Khan's comedy. It's not the jumping and the screaming and the crazy facial expressions. Is when he shoves Gulshan Grover through the sliding glass door, and then he's about to come in, all Sinatan hero, but then he pauses, he opens the sliding door, then pauses and goes, oh wait, and then he just goes right through it. I thought that's such a subtle moment. But works on so many levels, and that's the kind of humor I think you see of him in the future, like afterwards, like in Kalhonaho and things, where it's not just you say a funny line, wait for a reaction, and then move on. You kind of just do something funny, and then you keep going, and that bit just sort of builds slowly in the background, So, but yeah, no, I definitely would. If you want to see young Shah Rukh Khan do cool things, Yes Boss is a lot less erroneous than other movies of his.
Yeah, Amrita, how did it feel?
Yeah,
revisiting Yes Boss?
I think I agree with Shah. Like, if you would like to see a young Shah Rukh and see one of the, I think Yes Boss actually was one of the key films that made him into a big star. Yeah.
Sujoy?
I wouldn't mind if the movie were to chopped up into the best scenes from Juhi and Shahrukh available on Venus Channel or something. And I would definitely like a remastered version of all the songs to be available on YouTube, because if you see at Shahrukh's filmography, all the Red Chillies ones, or the ones that have been acquired by Red Chillies, like Chamatkar and English Babu Desi Mem, Chahat, they have all remastered prints on YouTube, and you can easily access those songs. And I would like Yes Boss to be available like that, because the print that is available on Venus channels are like uploaded in 2013 or something, when YouTube was newly becoming a thing, and they haven't been remastered since, and the quality on that is terrible. And as well as the movie that was available on B4U, it was meh, and if that was available, I would be happy to stick with that. But I guess for people who are actually craving for, or who want to experience young Shahrukh, sure, go ahead and watch Yes Boss on whatever stream it's available.
Yeah, it's a weird one, and I really want to watch Raju Ban Gaya Gentleman to just kind of like finish off this trilogy of Aziz Mirza, Shahrukh, and Juhi, just to kind of figure out which one is the best out of the 4 that they did together. I think it might be Raju Ban Gaya Gentleman, because I do feel there are both issues with Yes Boss and definitely with Phir Bhi Dil Hai Hindustani, which I do think was kind of a bit of a mess, even though it had a lot of that chemistry of Shahrukh and Juhi. I think in the Yes Boss, a lot of times I was just like feeling so bad for Seema, She's stuck between, everybody's horrible to her. Like Aditya Panscholi is horrible, Ma is terrible, Rahul is terrible, her girlfriend is terrible, they're just all pushing her in the worst possible situations and decisions. And it's just like Juhi's strength as a performer that you still come out of it thinking Seema is kind of like not a victim, and I think the movie doesn't provide that, but Juhi as a performer provides that. And I think a lot of that is that these actors were so great, their chemistry was so great, that it makes the product itself better than it actually is. If you had any other actors in this wouldn't have worked. It's still funny though, and I agree with you, Sujoy. There's a lot of sequences that just need to be chopped. Like, there's this whole sequence where he's pretty much doing a take on Amar Akbar Anthony, and he's drunk in front of the mirror. And it's not necessary. It's just like because Shahrukh wanted to do like Amitabh and kind of place himself in that superstar role, and it doesn't add anything there. And the other things that we need to make the story as a whole, like Aditya Pancholi getting a comeuppance, that wasn't there. So it is kind of an odd thing, and it does feel very low budget still, like, and not great in terms of cinematic. How do you kind of put it, like on like how they shot it, how it looked?
Yeah, the production value is very cheap.
Yeah, it is. It's not there. Like even like Shah, the sequence you mentioned with the door. Yeah. The door looks so cheap and like light. Like it's just like those things that don't really work.
Also, they don't cut like to that shot. Like I mean, and I'm assuming that was sort of an expansive sequence of having a stunt double break through that glass panel. But you don't get a cut to that, right? It's happening with Aditya Pancholi and Juhi in the foreground, which. Sort of, I mean, it was kind of confusing. It's like, why wouldn't you just cut to that and have that be its own? Like, even logistically, like, wouldn't that be a lot easier to do retakes of that versus having them in the frame? Like,
yeah. So I think the skill is maybe not there, but I think it's still a good movie, and I'm glad I watched it when it came out. I don't know if people that have never watched it and watch it for the first time, I think they might have a lot more issues with it. My daughter didn't last the whole movie. After an hour, it was her bedtime, so I didn't want to go through the whole thing. It is very, very long. So if you've not watched it back when it came out and you're watching it now, I would love to hear from people. But I'm glad I watched it. If Juhi and Shahrukh kind of like, and the songs really make it a worthwhile sit. I think that's the end of the show. I don't think we have anything else to say. Shah, man, where can people find you online?
For all my Bollywood reviews, you can go onto my site at blankpagebeatdown.com. I also write for comicears.com for anime, TV, movies, comic book movies, and all that good stuff. We also launched a podcast, Comic Ears Podcast, on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else. I have my own show, Split Screen Podcast, where we compare remakes and the originals. And you can get me on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at the Shah Shahid.
And Shah, man, this was so much fun. I promise you it won't be another 3 years before we get you back on. We'll do it again quicker.
I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to jinx it again.
You're just going to guilt me? You're just going to shame me for my choices?
I'm just only in DMs. For having me on again, finally. I look forward to being on again in 2025.
This is the most graceful Shah has ever been. Amrita, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at AmritaIQ and on YouTube and Instagram at Amrita by the Book. And also, right now, under the U Podcast main event, Beth and I are doing a limited edition podcast called Binging Bridgerton. And it's basically about the Bridgerton show on Netflix. And we're releasing it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Great. Sujoy?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at 93K, and you can also follow the Khandaan podcast on Instagram at Khandaan Podcast.
Great. I'm at Asim Bernie. I'm around, guys. You can probably find me. It's not like I'm around. But do drop us a review on Apple Podcast. It's not iTunes anymore. Apple Podcast, and drop us an email because we want to do a listener email kind of thing episode, and it's at youpodcasting@gmail.com. And I would like to say that एक इंसान और पॉडकास्टर के तौर से मैं आपके ईमेल स्वीकार करता हूँ.
Asim was really hard on that.
Yeah, you should have seen the acrobatics that I did.
Wow.
Guys,
how about I say दो कमजोर होस्ट एक कामयाब पॉडकास्ट नहीं बना सकते.
That's a better one. We should have gone to that. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being on the show. We'll be back very soon with a new episode.
Khandaan Podcast और acting group. Podcast.
Becoming a magician takes thousands of hours. Right, Ashley?
Oh, I'm not a magician. I'm a design specialist at the Container Store.
But you transform closets and pantries.
Well, I turn your most frustrating spaces into ones you love.
With a magic wand?
With Alpha, our customizable, adjustable, and affordable shelving and drawer system.
The amazing Ashley! Making daily frustration disappear.
Just doing my job.
Transform your space with Alpha and save 20% on purchases over $500. Get started with your free design at the Container Store today.